The transport ship docked with a soft hiss at Galactic Military Academy Station. Tai-Ho Kim took a deep breath as he gathered his few belongings. This moment marked the first time a human had been allowed to train at the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy. Earth had only joined the Galactic Confederation 3 years ago, and many species still viewed humans with suspicion. Tai-Ho straightened his back as the doors slid open. The docking bay bustled with activity. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and colors moved with purpose. Some floated, others crawled. Many walked on varying numbers of limbs. The air smelled strange, a mix of metallic cleaners and alien biology that the ship's filters hadn't prepared him for. A blue-skinned official approached him. The alien had 4 eyes that blinked in different patterns and wore a uniform with symbols Tai-Ho had studied, but still found confusing. "First human cadet," the customs officer asked, the translator device at his throat crackling slightly. "Yes, sir. Representing Earth," Tai-Ho replied, trying to keep his voice steady. The officer's upper limb waved dismissively. "Deathworlder. Bay 12 for processing." Tai-Ho felt a familiar sting at the term Deathworlder. It was technically accurate. Earth's higher gravity, unpredictable weather, and dangerous wildlife had earned it this classification, but the way most aliens said it made it sound like an insult. As he walked through the station, Tai-Ho felt almost buoyant. The station's gravity was set to Confederation standard, about 30% less than Earth's pull. Each step threatened to send him bouncing if he wasn't careful. His muscles, developed under Earth's heavier gravity, felt tight and ready to spring. At Bay 12, a bored-looking green alien with 6 eyes scanned his credentials. "Human physiology file." The processor muttered. "Unusual. Very unusual. High bone density, redundant organs, endocrine system prone to aggression responses." The being looked up, all 6 eyes focusing on Tai-Ho. "Are you really filled with corrosive acid?" "Just stomach acid for digestion," Tai-Ho explained, having heard this misconception before. "It stays where it belongs." The processor seemed unconvinced but completed the entry formalities. "Dormitory Block E, Room 217. Orientation begins in 2 standard hours." Block E turned out to be at the far end of the station. The room was small but functional, with a bed that seemed designed for a being with a very different shape. Tai-Ho placed his few belongings in the storage unit and checked his appearance in the reflection panel. The plain gray cadet uniform fit well enough, though the material felt strange against his skin. 2 hours later, Tai-Ho found himself in a large hall with approximately 300 other new cadets. He was the only human, and he could feel the stares. Some were curious, others wary, a few openly hostile. A tall, elegant alien with silver skin and 4 arms stepped onto the raised platform. The insignia on her uniform marked her as Commander Hansel, the Academy's head of new recruit training. "Cadets," her voice rang through the hall without apparent amplification, "you represent the finest young minds from 47 worlds. For the next 3 cycles, you will train to become officers in the Confederation's United Forces. Some of you will fail. Many of you will succeed. All of you will be changed." Her 4 eyes swept the crowd, pausing momentarily on Tai-Ho. "The Academy does not care about your planet of origin, your evolutionary advantages, or your cultural beliefs. We care only about your performance." Near Tai-Ho, a being with purple tentacles leaned toward a companion with a chitinous exoskeleton. "The human is interesting," the tentacled cadet whispered. "I heard their planet is so hostile they evolved to enjoy pain." "I heard they drink poison for pleasure," the insectoid cadet clicked back. Tai-Ho pretended not to hear, though his translator picked up every word. These were common misconceptions about humans, partly based on truth but twisted by alien perspectives. Yes, humans drank alcohol, which was technically toxic, and some humans did enjoy certain kinds of pain in specific contexts. But these alien cadets made it sound like humans were masochistic poison drinkers. After orientation, The new cadets were led to the assessment center, a vast chamber filled with various equipment designed to test physical capabilities across species. Instructor Ju-1, a stocky, orange-skinned alien with movements like flowing water, explained the process. Each of you will undergo baseline testing appropriate to your species. These results will form the foundation of your physical training program. Taeho waited his turn, watching as cadets from various worlds completed their assessments. Some demonstrated incredible flexibility, others remarkable strength within their gravity parameters. Still others showed mental abilities that seemed like magic to human perception. When Taeho's turn came, Instructor Ju-1 consulted his datapad. Human. Dithworlder parameters. He adjusted several settings on the equipment. Begin with the endurance circuit. The endurance circuit looked simple enough. A track that changed elevation and terrain with various obstacles. Taeho began at a steady pace. Finding the lighter gravity gave him a strange bouncing gait until he adjusted. As he continued, increasing his speed, he noticed the instructor and several other aliens watching him with increasing attention. What felt like a moderate jog to him seemed to be impressing them. By the time he completed the circuit, he had barely broken a sweat, while other species had required rest periods. Continue to strength assessment, Instructor Ju-1 directed, his voice carefully neutral. The strength tests were similar. What seemed reasonable effort to Taeho caused the equipment to register unexpected readings. By the time he finished the full assessment battery, a small crowd had gathered to observe. Fascinating, noted Instructor Ju-1, recording the results on his datapad. Perhaps there's something to these Deathworlders after all. Later, in the communal eating area, Taeho sat alone. The nutrition packet labeled "Human Safe" tasted bland but familiar, clearly synthesized to approximate Earth food. As he ate, he observed the various species around him, some glancing his way with new curiosity. A slender cadet with feathery appendages approached his table. "You are the human," the alien stated. "I am Kibum. My world has 1.2 standard gravity. Not a death world, but closer than most here. May I join you?" Taeho nodded, grateful for the gesture. "Your assessment results are being discussed by many," Kibum said, settling across from him. "They did not expect such physical capability. I think your time at the academy will be educational for everyone." Taeho smiled slightly. "I'm here to learn too." "Yes." Kibum's feathers rippled in what might have been amusement. "But some lessons will be harder for some to accept than others." 2 standard months into his training at the Galactic Military Academy, Taeho found himself standing outside Director Du-Yun's office. His request had caused quite a stir among the academy staff. No first-year cadet had ever asked to attempt the survival gauntlet. Inside the office, Director Du-Yun's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the human's file on his data screen. The director's skin shifted from its normal pale blue to a deeper shade, indicating concern. "The survival gauntlet is not for first years," Academy Director Du-Yun said firmly. "No cadet has ever attempted it before reaching 3rd cycle training." Commander Hansol's mandibles clicked in disagreement. She had been monitoring the human's progress with growing interest. The human requested it specifically. 3 standard cycles is the fastest completion time ever recorded, the director countered, his voice rising slightly. Most cadets require 4 or 5. The tension in the room grew thicker. Taeho's performance during standard training had been remarkable. His endurance exceeded all expectations, his problem-solving was unorthodox but effective, and his adaptability surprised even veteran instructors. But the gauntlet was different. It had broken experienced cadets from warrior species. "Let him try," came a new voice. Commander Naeung entered the office, her scaled skin reflecting the office lights in shimmering patterns. Unlike Hansol, who had developed a grudging respect for the human cadet, Naeung made no secret of her distrust of Earth and its inhabitants. "When he fails, it will remind everyone why Deathworlders must know their place," she added with a cold smile. Director Du-Yun tapped his claws against the desk, considering. After a long pause, he nodded slowly. Very well. The human may attempt the gauntlet, but he signs the enhanced risk waiver, and we pull them out at the first sign of serious danger. Later that day, Taiho stood in the preparation chamber as Instructor Juwan explained the challenge ahead. The survival gauntlet is not just a test, the orange-skinned instructor said. It is a simulation of the worst planetary conditions you might face in service to the Confederation. You will encounter 7 distinct environments, each deadlier than the last. Taiho nodded, studying the equipment laid out before him. The basic survival pack contained universal tools, a water purifier, emergency rations, and an emergency beacon. The beacon is not shame, Ju-1 emphasized. Many fine cadets have activated it when the challenge became too great. I understand, sir, Taiho replied. Word of the humans' attempt spread quickly through the academy. By evening, betting pools had formed. The odds weren't in Taiho's favor. 3 days before he hits the beacon, predicted a senior cadet from a high-gravity world. 2 days, countered another. The swamp alone will break him. Kai Bum, who had become something of a friend to Taiho, placed a small bet that the human would last at least a week. Others laughed at his optimism. That night, Taiho reviewed Earth's survival manuals on his datapad. The techniques developed on his homeworld had served humans for thousands of years across deserts, mountains, forests, and oceans. Earth itself had been the ultimate survival training ground. Morning came quickly. Taiho arrived at the Gauntlet entrance wearing the standard environmental suit customized for human physiology. A small crowd had gathered to witness the beginning of his attempt. Commander Nayoung was there, her scaled face impassive. Remember, cadet, there is no dishonor in recognizing your limitations. Taiho simply nodded, knowing that any response would be interpreted as either arrogance or fear. The entrance to the Gauntlet was a simple airlock. Beyond it lay the first environment. Taiho had not been told what to expect. Adaptation to the unknown was part of the test. The airlock cycled, and a computerized voice announced, Survival Gauntlet Sequence Initiating. Environment 1 preparing. Cadet vital signs monitoring active. Emergency protocol standing by. Taiho took a deep breath as the inner door slid open. Begin, announced the automated system. A wave of hot, humid air washed over him. The smell hit him immediately. Sulfur, decay, and something alien he couldn't identify. Before him stretched a vast swamp, with bubbling pools of greenish liquid and twisted vegetation rising from the muck. The light was dim, filtered through a thick canopy above and heavy fog. Several officers watched through monitoring screens as the humans stepped into the swamp without hesitation. Most species take hours just to analyze the environment, noted Instructor Juwan. Commander Nayoung made a dismissive sound. Rushing in shows poor judgment. But Taiho wasn't rushing blindly. His eyes narrowed as he assessed the toxic swamp simulation. Where other species might hesitate, he moved with purpose. Earth's varied biomes had prepared him for almost anything. The swamp reminded him of training exercises in Earth's bayous. He tested the ground before each step, using a tool from his pack as a probe. When he identified what appeared to be a solid path, he moved quickly but carefully. The monitoring team watched in surprise as Taiho made more progress in 2 hours than most cadets did in 2 days. His technique is unusual, Commander Hansol observed. He's not avoiding the challenges, he's seeking the most efficient path through them. By midday, Taiho had encountered his first major obstacle. A wide stretch of bubbling liquid blocked his path, too wide to go around within the simulation's boundaries. The vapors rising from it would be toxic even through his suit for extended exposure. Most cadets constructed rafts from the available vegetation, a process that typically took days of careful work. The monitors watched, expecting Taiho to begin this standard approach. Instead, he studied the liquid itself, then the surrounding plant life. Finding a particular type of reed, he gathered several. After stripping them down, he bound them together to create a long breathing tube. What is he doing? Director Du Yun asked, leaning forward. The answer came as Tai-ho waded into the liquid, the breathing tube in his mouth, his pack held above his head. He walked across the bottom of the toxic pool, completely submerged except for the tip of his breathing tube. "Incredible," whispered Ki-Bum, who had come to watch the monitors. "Our species would never consider that approach." The psychological barrier of submersion in toxic liquid. Commander Nayoung's scales darkened. One obstacle. There are many more ahead. By nightfall, Tai-ho had covered distance that should have taken 3 days. He found a relatively safe spot on elevated ground, checked his equipment, and consumed a ration pack. The monitoring team expected him to rest. Most species required significant recovery time after such exertion. Instead, after just 4 hours of sleep, Tai-ho was moving again, using the night's slightly cooler conditions to his advantage. "His endurance is remarkable," Instructor Ju-won noted, updating his records. "But surely the cumulative stress will affect him soon." Commander Hansol's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Perhaps, or perhaps we've underestimated what evolution on a death world truly means." By the second week, the Academy was buzzing with rumors. The human had cleared the desert, swamp, and tundra scenarios in days, not weeks. Senior cadets who had once scoffed at Tai-ho's attempt now gathered around monitoring stations, watching his progress with growing amazement. In the observation center, Instructor Ju-won stared at the data screens, his orange skin paling to a lighter shade that indicated disbelief among his species. "It's impossible," Instructor Ju-won muttered, reviewing the data. "His endurance readings exceed our charts." Science Officer Minji floated into the room. Her species evolved in a gas giant's upper atmosphere, and on station she used a gravity nullification field to move around. Her translucent body glowed softly with patterns that expressed her thoughts. "Earth gravity is 1.4 times our standard," replied Science Officer Minji. "His muscle density alone gives him advantages. But it's more than that. Look at his problem-solving patterns." She gestured with a wispy appendage toward the main screen where recordings showed Tai-ho adapting to each new environment with remarkable speed. While other species followed established protocols, he improvised continuously. In the desert simulation, he dug beneath the sand during peak heat hours, she noted. Most species build shelters above ground. Commander Hansol joined them, her 4 eyes fixed on the current feed showing Tai-ho navigating a volcanic terrain. The simulation featured rivers of molten rock, toxic gas vents, and unstable ground. "This environment has the highest withdrawal rate," Hansol said. "Most cadets activate their emergency beacons by the 3rd day." Yet Tai-ho moved with confidence. When faced with a wide lava flow, instead of taking the safe route that added days to the journey, he fashioned heat shields for his legs from the specialized materials in his pack. He then sprinted across a narrow section of the flow, his movements quick and precise. Director Du Yun entered the room just in time to witness this maneuver. "Is he insane?" the director asked, his blue skin darkening with concern. "No," Minji responded, her body pulsing with light patterns that indicated excitement. "He calculated the risk. Look at his vital signs, elevated but controlled. His species can regulate their stress response." Indeed, the biological monitoring showed Tai-ho's heart rate increased before the crossing, then stabilized during the actual danger. "That's not normal," Ju-won said. "Most species show peak stress during maximum danger. Humans appear to enter a focused state when facing immediate threats," Minji explained. "They call it adrenaline response. It enhances their performance rather than hindering it." Commander Nayoung watched from the doorway, her scaled skin now a dull color that reflected her displeasure. One reckless success doesn't prove superiority. Yet even she couldn't deny the evidence as Tai-ho continued through the volcanic terrain at an unprecedented pace. In a section where shifting ground plates created gaps that could swallow a cadet whole, Tai-ho leaped across with strength that surprised even those now familiar with his capabilities. In the volcanic terrain simulation, where most cadets took 10 days to navigate safely, Taiho completed it in 36 hours. The achievement set a new Academy record by a margin so wide that some questioned if the simulation had malfunctioned. A special meeting of the faculty was called. Science officer Minji presented her analysis of the humans' performance. Humans evolved alongside natural disasters. Minji explained to the stunned faculty. Volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, tsunamis. They've been surviving catastrophes for their entire history. She displayed images from Earth's geological record. Their planet has active tectonic plates, extreme weather patterns, and biological hazards that would be considered apocalyptic on many Confederation worlds. What we consider survival scenarios, they might call Tuesday. This statement was met with uncomfortable silence. Many species in the Confederation evolved on worlds with stable conditions, where gradual adaptation was possible. The idea of a species that thrived amid constant environmental threats was disturbing. They're simply built differently, Minji continued. Their endocrine system releases chemicals during stress that improve performance. Their bodies can push beyond normal limits when necessary, then repair the damage afterward. Director Du Yun's color shifted to indicate deep thought. Could this be why their diplomatic corps insisted on military integration? They knew what would happen when we tested them. No one had an answer. When Taiho emerged from the volcanic environment into a rest area, he was allowed a recovery period before the next challenge. The Academy regulations required at least 48 hours between major environments. Most cadets use this time for extensive medical treatment and rest. Taiho visited the medical center for a standard check, ate 4 large meals, slept for 12 hours, and then requested to continue. The regulations are clear, Instructor Ju-won informed him. 48 hours minimum. I'm fully recovered, Taiho insisted. Medical scans confirmed his claim. His body had already repaired the minor damage from the volcanic environment. The medical officer, a being with 6 limbs and glowing sensory organs, could only shake his head in wonder. Deathworlders, he muttered, though the tone now held a hint of respect. During his mandatory rest period, Taiho spent time in the Academy's common areas. Word of his achievements had spread, and many cadets now approached him with questions or simply to observe the unusual being who was rewriting Academy records. Cadet Su Bin, a 4-armed technician from a low-gravity moon, approached Taiho in the mess hall. Her species had evolved in a world with 1/3 Earth's gravity, giving her a slender, almost delicate appearance. Her skin changed colors with her emotions, currently showing a pattern of curious blue swirls. "How do you keep going without rest cycles?" she asked, settling across from him with a tray of nutrient solution. Taiho smiled. "On Earth, we call it persistence hunting. Before we had technology, we chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Your species hunted by exhausting other species to death." Subin's chromatophores paled in shock, turning a milky white. "We're evolved to never give up," he replied simply. Subin's color slowly returned to normal as she processed this information. "That explains much. My world has limited resources, but few environmental threats. We evolved to conserve energy whenever possible." "Different worlds, different solutions," Taiho said. "That's why the Confederation works, right? We all bring different strengths." This conversation was recorded by the Academy's standard systems and later reviewed by the faculty. Science officer Minji flagged it as significant. "The human understands something we've missed," she told Director Du Yun privately. "We've been viewing Deathworld traits as dangerous or unpredictable, but they're simply different adaptations." As Taiho prepared to enter the 4th environment, a high-pressure deep ocean simulation, betting pools shifted dramatically. Now the odds favored him completing the entire gauntlet in record time. Commander Nadon watched these developments with growing concern. The success of one human cadet could mean more would follow. The military balance of the Confederation might shift in ways no one had anticipated. Perhaps, she whispered to herself as she watched Taiho enter the ocean environment without hesitation, "We should have studied Earth more carefully before inviting them to join us." The Academy's central monitoring chamber hummed with tension. 4 weeks into the survival gauntlet, Tai-Ho had surpassed all expectations. He had completed 6 of the 7 environments, each in record time. Now only the final challenge remained, the gas giant atmospheric dive. Commander Na-young watched the monitors with growing concern as Tai-Ho approached the final phase. Her scaled skin had darkened to a deep purple, a sign of stress among her species. No cadet had ever completed this environment in less than 3 weeks. Many failed entirely. "He cannot be allowed to succeed so easily," she muttered, her claws tapping against the control panel. Years of military doctrine and balance between species hung in the balance. If humans proved this adaptable, this capable, the power structure of the entire Confederation could shift. "Adjust the atmospheric pressure," she ordered suddenly. "Increase turbulence by 30%. The technician, a 6-limbed being with compound eyes, turned all eyes toward her in shock. "That exceeds safety protocols, Commander," he said, his voice buzzing with concern. "Do it anyway," she hissed. "If Deathworlders are so resilient, let's see how far that goes." The technician hesitated, looking around for support, but found none. Most senior staff had stepped away for a meal break. Only junior personnel remained at the stations. "Commander, I must note my objection in the log," the technician said, but his limbs moved to input the commands. "Noted," Na-young replied coldly. On the main screen, they could see Tai-Ho preparing to board the atmospheric diving pod. The simulation would test his ability to navigate through the turbulent layers of a gas giant planet, taking samples and readings while managing life support and vehicle systems under extreme conditions. The pod was designed to withstand immense pressure, but had intentional flaws that cadets needed to identify and manage. Now, with Commander Na-young's adjustments, those flaws would be magnified beyond standard parameters. Tai-Ho settled into the pilot's seat, running through pre-launch checks with methodical precision. The training staff had noted his unusual calm before challenging environments. Where other species showed increasing anxiety as difficulty increased, the humans seemed to become more focused. "Launch sequence initiating," came the automated announcement. "Atmospheric dive commencing in 3, 2, 1. The pod detached from the simulated dock and began its descent into the swirling clouds of the gas giant environment. Almost immediately, the effects of Na-young's adjustments became apparent. The craft shook violently, warning lights flashing across control panels. Inside, Tai-Ho's eyes widened momentarily. But he didn't panic. The crushing pressure felt almost familiar, not unlike the deep-sea training he'd undergone on Earth. The military had tested human cadets in crushing ocean depths, preparing them for extreme environments long before the Confederation made contact. As alarms blared, he methodically assessed the situation. The pressure readings were far higher than the briefing had indicated they should be. Something was wrong. "Interesting," he murmured to himself. The pod tumbled wildly, systems failing under pressure that would crush most species. The main propulsion system went offline, followed by secondary guidance. Life support flickered. In the monitoring room, the technicians watched in horror. "He should activate the emergency beacon," one said. No cadet could navigate this. Commander Na-young remained silent, her scales now almost black with tension. Back in the pod, Tai-Ho worked with quick, deliberate movements. He manually overrode the safety systems, which would normally trigger an automatic abort. Then he vented excess pressure from non-critical compartments, effectively creating air pockets that balanced the external force. "What is he doing?" a junior officer asked. "That's not in any simulation protocol." "He's treating the pod like a submarine in a crush depth scenario," another responded with disbelief. Using techniques no alien would consider, Tai-Ho stabilized the craft. Earth's oceans had taught humans that pressure could be managed, channeled, even used to advantage if understood properly. Commander Na-young leaned forward, her claws digging into the edge of the console. "Increase turbulence another 15%, she ordered quietly. "Commander," the technician protested. That could cause a catastrophic failure. Do it, she insisted, her voice a low hiss. Reluctantly, the technician complied. On screen, the pod was immediately caught in a massive storm system, spinning out of control. All communication with the craft cut out. "We've lost telemetry," announced a monitoring officer. "Life signs are unclear." A tense silence fell over the room. Had they gone too far? Suddenly, a new signal appeared. He's reconfigured the communications array," the communications officer said with disbelief. "He's bouncing a signal off the simulation boundaries using the storm's own electromagnetic properties." The visual feed returned, showing Taiho inside the craft. His face was calm, focused. Blood trickled from a small cut on his forehead where he'd struck a panel during the turbulence, but he ignored it. His hands moved steadily over the controls, making adjustments that defied conventional procedures. "He's adapting to our sabotage," gasped the monitoring officer. "That's not in any training manual." "No," replied Director Du Yun, who had entered silently and had been observing from the back of the room. "It's pure survival instinct, honed on a world that tries to kill its inhabitants daily." Naeyoung turned, startled by the director's presence, his 4 eyes fixed on her with an unreadable expression. "Commander Naeyoung, you will report to my office immediately after this simulation concludes," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The adjustment logs have been noted." She stiffened but nodded once in acknowledgement. On screen, Taiho had stabilized the pod and was now advancing through the gas layers with remarkable speed. He'd discovered that by riding the edge of the storm systems, something no training protocol recommended, he could use their energy to propel the craft deeper while conserving fuel. "Extraordinary," murmured Science Officer Minji, who had joined the director. "He's not fighting the environment. He's using it." The next 5 days passed in a state of continued amazement for the Academy staff. Taiho navigated the most hostile atmospheric conditions ever simulated, collecting all required samples and data. Where other cadets had taken cautious, methodical approaches that stretched the mission to weeks, he completed each objective with efficient precision. On the 5th day, the pod emerged from the final layer of the gas giant's atmosphere. Systems battered but functional. Mission complete. Taiho completed the atmospheric challenge in 5 days, less than a quarter of the previous record. As he docked the pod and the simulation ended, the monitoring room remained silent. The implications were clear to everyone present. Humans weren't just another species joining the Confederation. They represented something entirely new. Beings evolved to thrive in conditions that would break most other species. Director Du Yun turned to Science Officer Minji. "Prepare a full report for Confederation Command. They need to understand what we've witnessed here." He paused, looking back at the screen where Taiho was exiting the pod, moving with the same steady confidence he'd shown throughout the entire Gauntlet. "And perhaps," the director added quietly, "we all need to reconsider what the term Deathworlder truly means." The Great Hall of the Galactic Military Academy gleamed under soft blue lights. Today, it was filled to capacity with cadets, instructors, and even some Confederation officials who had traveled specifically for this event. The completion ceremony for the Survival Gauntlet was usually a grand affair with music and speeches, but today it was subdued with shock. The entire administrative council sat rigidly in their formal uniforms as Taiho stood at attention before them. His human form looked small compared to many of the alien species present, yet somehow he seemed to fill the space with his presence. Director Du Yun rose from his seat, his blue skin shifting through patterns that indicated deep emotion among his species. He paused, looking at the data tablet in his hand one last time, as if confirming what he already knew. 38 standard days, announced Director Du Yun, his voice echoing through the silent hall. Less than 1/3 the previous record for the Survival Gauntlet. Silence filled the hall. No applause, no cheers, just the heavy weight of a paradigm shifting. "Impossible," someone whispered from the back rows. The words seemed to hang in the air. Tai-ho remained at attention, eyes forward, expression calm. He had recovered completely from the Gauntlet, another feat that amazed the medical staff. Where other species showed lasting effects from such an ordeal, his body had repaired itself with remarkable speed. Commander Na-young stepped forward, duty-bound to present the completion badge. Her scaled skin had a new pattern, one rarely seen on her species. It indicated acceptance after resistance, a reluctant change of perspective. Her eyes met Tai-ho's with a mixture of reluctance and newfound respect. "The Academy recognizes Cadet Tai-ho Kim of Earth," she stated formally. "Your performance will be entered into our records." She pinned the badge to his uniform, a simple six-pointed star made of a metal that shimmered with an inner light. It was the highest honor a cadet could receive, and none had earned it in their first year until now. As tradition required, Tai-ho was allowed to speak. The hall fell even more silent, if that was possible, as everyone waited to hear what the human would say. "Thank you," Tai-ho said simply. "I am honored to represent Earth at this academy. This achievement is not mine alone. It belongs to all humans who have faced challenges throughout our history and refused to give up." His words were translated through the hall's systems, each species hearing them in their own language. Many shifted uncomfortably. The implied strength of an entire species of beings like Tai-ho was unsettling. After the ceremony, cadets from across the academy approached Tai-ho. Some offered congratulations, others simply wanted to be near the cadet who had changed everything. Ki-bum, who had bet on Tai-ho's success from the beginning, grinned widely. "My winnings will pay for a new atmospheric converter for my home colony," he said, his feathery appendages rippling with joy. Su-bin approached as well, her skin glowing with patterns of admiration. "You have shown us something important," she said quietly. "Different does not mean inferior or superior, just different." Tai-ho nodded. "That's what the Confederation is supposed to be about, isn't it? Unity through diversity." Later, in the director's private chambers, a different conversation took place. Director Du-yun had called together his senior staff to discuss the implications of what they had witnessed. If one human can do this, Director Du-yun mused, pacing slowly around the circular room, what does it mean for the Confederation's military balance? Commander Hansol's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Earth has billions of humans. If even a small percentage have Tai-ho's capabilities. Commander Na-young, who had been formally reprimanded for her interference in the Gauntlet, spoke up. "We should restrict their numbers in our forces, limit their advancement." "That would be unwise," countered Hansol. "Better to have them as allies than potential enemies." Science Officer Minji floated near the ceiling, her translucent body pulsing with light patterns that indicated deep analysis. She descended slowly, placing a data tablet on the table. "I've analyzed the results. Humans don't just survive hardship. They thrive on challenge. Their entire history is overcoming impossible odds." She displayed a series of images from Earth's history. Humans climbing the highest mountains, diving to ocean depths, surviving in deserts and frozen wastes, even leaving their planet with primitive technology. "Most species evolved to find stable niches," Minji continued. "Humans evolved to adapt to constant change. When faced with something that should kill them, they often become stronger." Director Du-yun absorbed this information silently. Finally, he spoke. "We've been calling Earth a death world," responded the director. "Perhaps we should consider that from another perspective. To them, our worlds might seem too easy." The implications hung heavy in the room. The Confederation had classified Earth as a death world out of a sense of superiority, a planet so harsh that its inhabitants were to be viewed with caution. Now they had to consider that perhaps Earth's challenges had forged something formidable. "The next transport from Earth arrives in 20 days, Hansol noted. 5 more human cadets will be joining us. We will welcome them," Director Du-yun decided. "And we will learn from them, as they learn from us. The Confederation must adapt, just as humans do." Across the station, Tai-ho stood alone at the observation deck, gazing at the stars. Among the thousands of points of light was Seoul, Earth's star, too distant to see with the naked eye, but present in his mind nonetheless. A message flashed on his communicator. A simple congratulations from Earth Command. And new orders. Continue to exceed expectations. He smiled slightly. Earth had waited generations for contact with alien life, only to discover that the galaxy viewed them as dangerous curiosities from a hostile world. Now, perhaps, that perception would begin to change. Taiho thought about the other human cadets who would soon arrive. They would face the same prejudices, the same underestimation, but they would also have something he didn't. They would have his example to follow. In the vast tapestry of the galaxy, humanity was just beginning to weave its thread. And that thread, forged in the challenges of Earth, would prove stronger than anyone had anticipated. He smiled slightly. This was just the beginning. The stars continued their silent watch, indifferent to the small beings who studied them. But among those beings, a new understanding was dawning. That the harshest worlds might produce the most resilient species, and that what doesn't kill you really does make you stronger.